The stars over Earth's skyline glittered like diamonds scattered across a velvet canvas, far more visible now than they had ever been in the past. Since the construction of the Intergalactic Diplomatic Center, Earth's newest pride and joy, light pollution around the spaceport had been drastically reduced to foster a sense of connection between the planet and the vast expanse of space beyond. Tonight, that connection felt almost tangible. The people of Earth were waiting for something extraordinary, something that would forever alter their place in the universe. David Connors stood on the sleek platform of the spaceport, the chilly evening air clinging to his skin as the atmosphere buzzed with anticipation. He adjusted the cuff of his dark, tailored suit, his brow furrowed slightly in concentration. He had been through countless diplomatic meetings before, but nothing like this. Tonight was different. Tonight, he wasn't just negotiating for trade agreements or political favors. Tonight he was representing humanity in front of the Thranthorians, the most advanced and enigmatic species Earth had ever encountered. He took a deep breath, trying to steady his nerves. All eyes would be on him. The weight of this moment was not lost on him, nor was the impact it would have on Earth's future. As Earth's lead diplomat in intergalactic relations, David had been working toward this moment for years. But nothing had prepared him for the unexpected proposal he was about to receive, a proposition that would send shockwaves through the galaxy. A faint hum resonated through the air, and David's pulse quickened. The Thranthorian ship, a sleek, silver vessel that glowed faintly like it had captured the essence of starlight, descended gracefully from the heavens. Its design was unlike anything built by human hands. It hovered effortlessly above the platform, a seamless blend of art and technology. Every line of the ship seemed to hum with energy, reflecting the advanced capabilities of its creators. As the ship landed, a soft, melodic tone echoed across the platform. The Thranthorians were here. The ramp descended with a fluid, almost organic motion, and from the shadows emerged the Thranthorian delegation. They were tall, each one at least a head taller than any human on the platform. Their silver-hued skin shimmered like metal under the soft lighting, their elongated limbs moving with an ethereal grace. The Thranthorians were beautiful in a way that was both mesmerizing and alien. Yet, it was not their technological prowess or their physical elegance that captivated David. It was her. Ambassador Ziona Thalvara stepped into view, and for a moment the world seemed to stop. Her skin was not silver like the others, but a deep, luminous blue, reminiscent of the night sky just before dawn. It shimmered in the light, giving her an otherworldly radiance. Her long, silken hair was the color of sunlight, a golden cascade that fell past her shoulders, almost glowing against the backdrop of her blue skin. Her eyes, crystalline and reflecting light like rare jewels, were a striking shade of violet, giving her a piercing yet serene gaze. She was dressed in a flowing garment made of delicate, iridescent material that moved as if it were alive, swirling softly with every step she took. Ziona had always stood out among the Thranthorian diplomats, but in person, she was even more awe-inspiring. David's breath caught in his throat as she approached, her eyes locking onto his with an intensity that was both unnerving and magnetic. For a brief moment, it was just the two of them on that platform, the Earth diplomat and the alien ambassador, standing on the precipice of something monumental. David had met her before, during the initial stages of their negotiations, but those encounters had been brief, formal. He had never seen her like this, so close, so real. As she neared, David's mind raced with thoughts of their past interactions. Ziona had always been inscrutable, her emotions impossible to read behind that perfectly composed facade. Yet, there had been moments, fleeting glances, subtle shifts in her tone that had made him question whether there was something more beneath the surface, something deeper. Ziona stepped onto the platform, her presence commanding without needing to say a word. The other Thranthorian diplomats fanned out behind her, maintaining their poised silence. David felt the eyes of his own delegation on him, waiting for his next move. He cleared his throat and forced a professional smile onto his face. Ambassador Ziona, he greeted, his voice steady despite the whirlwind of emotions churning beneath the surface. Welcome to Earth. Thank you, David Connors, Ziona replied, her voice as smooth as velvet, with a slight, musical lilt that marked her alien accent. She inclined her head gracefully, her golden hair catching the light. It is an honor to be here once again. David's heart raced, but he maintained his composed exterior. The formalities continued: handshakes, introductions, the rehearsed pleasantries of high-stakes diplomacy. But throughout it all, Ziona's eyes never left his. there was a weight to her gaze, a purpose that made him uneasy, as if she could see through the polished veneer of his diplomatic training and into the very heart of who he was. The delegation made their way into the grand chamber of the Intergalactic Diplomatic Center, a marvel of modern architecture designed to represent the unity between Earth and its extraterrestrial visitors. The walls were made of translucent glass that shifted colors depending on the time of day, currently glowing a soft, ambient blue to honor the Tranthorians' arrival. A long, crescent-shaped table dominated the room, with the Earth delegation on one side and the Tranthorians on the other. David took his seat, opposite Ziona, and tried to focus on the task at hand. The agenda for the meeting was supposed to be straightforward discussions on trade, technological collaboration, and cultural exchanges. But something about the air felt different tonight, charged, expectant. Ziona sat gracefully in her chair, her fingers lightly tracing the surface of the table, as if she could feel the energy in the room. Her violet eyes flicked up to meet his, and David felt that strange, unspoken connection again, an almost magnetic pull that defied explanation. He had always been curious about her, but now there was something more, something that unsettled him. As the initial pleasantries were exchanged, and the first items on the agenda were brought forth, David felt a creeping sense of tension. Something was coming. He could feel it, though he didn't yet know what. And then, with an elegant lift of her hand, Ziona interrupted the flow of the meeting. The room fell into a hushed silence, all eyes turning toward her. Before we proceed with the matters at hand, Ziona began, her voice calm but commanding. I have an additional proposal to make, one that is of great importance to both Tranthoria and Earth. David's stomach twisted with apprehension. This wasn't on the agenda. He exchanged a quick glance with his colleagues, but they were just as bewildered as he was. Ziona continued, her violet gaze never wavering from his. And Tranthorian culture. She said slowly, her tone measured, marriage is seen not only as a union of individuals but as a union of worlds. A symbol of peace, unity, and shared futures. It is our belief that such a union between Thoria and Earth could be the key to lasting harmony between our peoples. David's heart began to race. His mind struggled to keep up with the sudden shift in the conversation. Marriage? Was this some sort of cultural metaphor? Ziona stood, her golden hair shimmering in the ambient light as she stepped closer to him. Her movements were graceful, deliberate, each step calculated for maximum impact. The room felt as if it had shrunk, the attention of every person, human and alien, fixed on her. And so she said, her voice softening but losing none of its intensity, I offer my hand in marriage to you, David Connors. For a moment, there was nothing. Just silence. The air seemed to freeze as the gravity of her words sank in. David's mind went blank, every carefully crafted diplomatic response fleeing from his grasp. He blinked, unsure if he had heard her correctly. Excuse me, he finally managed to stammer, his voice barely above a whisper. Ziona's expression remained calm, but there was a subtle vulnerability in her eyes, a glimpse of something deeply personal beneath her diplomatic mask. I propose a marriage between myself and you, David Connors, she repeated, each word carefully measured. A marriage that would symbolize the bond between Earth and Tranthoria. A partnership that transcends mere treaties and agreements. Together we could create something greater, a lasting peace. The weight of her words crashed down on him like a tidal wave. David's mind raced, trying to process what was happening. This wasn't just a proposal of marriage, it was a political maneuver of staggering proportions. A marriage between a human diplomat and an alien ambassador. It was unheard of. Unthinkable. Yet, as he stared into Ziona's crystalline eyes, he could see that she was entirely serious. This wasn't a joke, it wasn't a ploy, it was real. The room buzzed with murmurs, but David couldn't hear any of it. His entire world had narrowed to the space between himself and Ziona, the blue-skinned, golden-haired alien ambassador who had just turned his life upside down. He opened his mouth to respond, but no words came. How could there be? This wasn't the kind of proposal one prepared for. He had expected negotiations, discussions of trade routes, perhaps a few heated debates, but not this. Not a marriage proposal. Not from her. Ziona stood there, waiting, her gaze unwavering. For the first time, David saw the woman behind the diplomat, the vulnerability, the hope, the risk she was taking. She was offering him more than just a marriage. She was offering him a chance to change the course of history. But could he accept it? The weight of the decision pressed down on him, and as he sat there, stunned and speechless, one thing became abundantly clear. Nothing would ever be the same again. The echo of Ziona's proposal hadn't even faded when the flood of chaos began. It spread like wildfire first through the room, then out to the world. Whispers became gasps, murmurs became shouts. The stunned silence shattered into a cacophony of opinions. Diplomats from both Earth and Thrantoria glanced between David and Ziona, unsure how to process what had just transpired. The proposal had hit with the force of a meteor strike. David Connors sat frozen, eyes locked on Ziona, her calm expression a stark contrast to the storm brewing around them. Her golden hair shimmered under the soft lighting of the room, her blue skin glowing faintly like the depths of a twilight ocean. It should have been a beautiful, almost serene sight. But to David, everything felt surreal, like the ground had been ripped out from under him. Marriage? To her? His mind swirled with 1,000 thoughts. This wasn't just about personal feelings, it was about two worlds. And while Ziona's offer carried the weight of diplomacy, it also felt deeply personal, far more than any agreement they had negotiated in sterile boardrooms. Ziona's violet eyes stayed fixed on his, unwavering. For a moment she seemed impervious to the chaos around them, waiting for his response. But he had no words. Nothing made sense. Not yet. David's superior, Ambassador Lewis, leaned in from his seat, his voice low but insistent. "David," he hissed, "you need to say something. Now." But what was there to say? How could he respond when the very fabric of his reality had shifted in an instant? He opened his mouth, but nothing came out. His thoughts were a blur, entangled in a web of diplomacy, personal feelings, and the sheer shock of the moment. Ziona, still composed, seemed to sense his paralysis. With graceful, deliberate steps, she retreated to her seat, never breaking eye contact. It was clear she wasn't pushing for an answer now, she had simply placed the offer on the table. And now the world had to contend with it. The room erupted into hurried discussions, the Earth delegation trying to recover from the blow. Ziona's fellow Thrantorian diplomats remained stoic, their faces unreadable. Whatever their personal feelings about the proposal, they were well trained enough to mask them. Earth's officials, on the other hand, struggled to keep up. "I think we should recess for a moment," Ambassador Lewis finally declared, attempting to restore some semblance of order. "We need to discuss this development." Ziona gave a single nod, her face still serene, and the delegation filed out of the grand chamber. David followed, walking in a daze, unsure where his feet were leading him. The heavy doors slid shut behind them, sealing the chaos inside. But the real storm had only just begun. As soon as David stepped out into the crisp evening air, the world descended upon him. Reporters, journalists, cameras all surged forward, their shouts blending into a confusing roar of questions and accusations. "Mr. Connors, is it true the Thrantorians have proposed marriage as a diplomatic solution? What's your response to the ambassador's offer? Are you considering accepting? What does this mean for Earth?" David's head spun, the barrage of questions slamming into him from all sides. He raised a hand instinctively to shield himself, but the media push was relentless. Security personnel moved swiftly, creating a human barricade around him as he was ushered into the waiting vehicle. The door shut with a solid thunk, silencing the madness outside. David leaned back in the seat, heart pounding. The gravity of the situation weighed heavy on him, pressing down like a physical force. He had expected a difficult evening of negotiations, talks about trade routes, technology exchanges, perhaps even cultural exchanges. But this? A marriage proposal? He could hardly process it. His comm device buzzed incessantly with messages from his superiors, but he ignored it for now. He needed space, time to think, to breathe. Yet the silence inside the car only amplified the chaos in his mind. The ride back to the diplomatic complex was mercifully brief, but the storm awaited him there too. As he stepped into the building, his colleagues were already gathered in the conference room, their expressions a mixture of confusion, anger, and bewilderment. Ambassador Lewis wasted no time. "What the hell was that?" David, his voice was sharp, though not accusatory, more baffled than anything. "Did you know this was coming?" David shook his head, still trying to gather his thoughts. "No," he said slowly, "I had no idea. This wasn't part of any negotiation. She didn't give any indication." Ambassador Lewis sighed, rubbing his temples as though he could stave off the impending headache. "This is unprecedented. Earth has been trying to establish a steady diplomatic relationship with Thranthoria for years, and now they throw this at us? A marriage proposal? It's more than that. Another diplomat, Serenguian, chimed in, her tone thoughtful. It's a strategic move. A marriage between David and Ambassador Ziona would be a symbol, a powerful one. It could solidify ties between Earth and Thranthoria in ways no treaty or alliance ever could. That's exactly what concerns me, Lewis replied. It's too much. Earth would be binding itself to Thranthoria in a way that's unprecedented. The political implications are staggering. David stared at the floor, his mind still racing. He could hear their words, their analysis, but he was still stuck on one simple, overwhelming fact: Ziona had chosen him. Why? Out of all the possible paths toward diplomacy, why had she proposed marriage? And why him? He wasn't naive. He understood that this was more than just a personal proposal. It was a calculated move on Thranthoria's part. But even so, Ziona had spoken with a sincerity that unnerved him. She wasn't just playing a political game, there was something more, something deeper in her eyes when she had looked at him. We need to discuss how to handle this, Sarah said, cutting through David's thoughts. The public reaction is already out of control. People are either seeing this as the opportunity of a lifetime or a dangerous power grab by the Thranthorians. David winced. Of course, the public. His thoughts flashed to his family, his friends. What would they think? What would Lily think? His younger sister had always been his confidante, the one who could help him see things clearly when he was overwhelmed. He would need to speak with her soon, before the news reached her through the chaos of the media. Lewis cleared his throat. David, I need to know where your head is at. This is going to blow up fast, and we need to be prepared. Are you even considering this? Or should we look at ways to diplomatically reject the offer? David opened his mouth, then closed it again. His mind was still swirling, but he had to say something. I don't know, he admitted finally, his voice quieter than he intended. I don't know what to think yet. I need time. Ambassador Lewis nodded, his expression softening slightly. We understand. But time is something we don't have much of. The Thranthorians are expecting a response soon, and the world is watching. The meeting wrapped up soon after, with a plan to reconvene the next day. David left the conference room feeling no clearer than when he had entered. He needed space away from the questions, the speculation, the noise. That evening, David retreated to his apartment on the outskirts of the diplomatic complex, hoping to find some semblance of peace. But the world outside had other plans. The media frenzy continued, with news outlets broadcasting constant updates about the Thranthorian proposal. He turned off the hollow screen, unable to take any more. As he sat in the quiet of his living room, his mind returned to Ziona. Her presence lingered, haunting him. What had she been thinking? How could she have thought this was the right way forward? And yet, the memory of her steady gaze, the quiet confidence in her voice, gnawed at him. He replayed the moment over and over in his mind. There had been no hesitation in her words, no doubt in her tone. Ziona wasn't just offering a political solution, she was offering a partnership, one that was deeply personal, despite the diplomatic stakes. David rubbed his temples, trying to ease the tension building there. He couldn't deny the pull he felt toward her, the strange connection that had flickered to life during their previous encounters. But was that enough? Was it even real, or was he just caught up in the whirlwind of the moment? His comm device buzzed on the table, and he glanced at the screen. It was Lily. He answered the call, grateful for the familiar face of his younger sister. Her dark hair was pulled into a loose bun, and her hazel eyes sparkled with curiosity. Of course, she already knew. So Lily began, a mischievous smile tugging at her lips. Are you going to marry the blue alien princess, or what? David groaned, leaning back on the couch. Please don't start. Lily laughed softly, but her expression quickly turned more serious. I'm not joking, though. This is huge, David. Are you okay? He sighed. I don't know, I'm still trying to wrap my head around it. I mean, it's not every day you get a marriage proposal from an alien ambassador. Lily nodded, her face softening with concern. I figured as much. But this isn't just about politics. I saw the way Ziona looked at you during the summit. There's something more going on here. David hesitated, the memory of Ziona's gaze returning to him. You noticed that too? Of course I did. I'm not blind, Lily said with a teasing grin, but her tone remained thoughtful. David, I think you need to figure out what you want before you start worrying about what everyone else is saying. Do you feel anything for her? David ran a hand through his hair, his thoughts swirling again. I don't know, maybe. It's complicated. It always is, Lily replied softly. But whatever happens, just remember you don't have to decide for the whole planet. You just have to decide for yourself. Her words lingered in his mind long after the call ended. As David stared out into the night, he realized that Lily was right. This wasn't just about Earth or Thranthoria, it was about him, what he wanted, what he felt. But could he make a decision that would change the course of two worlds? And if so, was he willing to take that leap? The stars outside twinkled in the clear night sky, as if waiting for his answer. David Connors stood at the edge of the landing platform, staring at the sleek Thranthorian ship hovering in front of him. Its silver surface gleamed in the artificial light, and the air around it hummed with energy. The design, elegant and almost alive, radiated an advanced technology far beyond what Earth had ever developed. As he stood there, the enormity of the situation settled in this journey was no ordinary diplomatic trip. It was the beginning of something far more significant, something that could change his life forever. Beside him, Ziona Thalvara stood with her usual poise, her blue skin glowing faintly under the lights, her golden hair shimmering like a halo around her head. She radiated a calm confidence, but there was something else there too, something just below the surface. David had learned to read the subtleties in her expressions, and despite her serene exterior, he sensed a tension in her, something that mirrored his own apprehension. You look hesitant, Ziona said, her voice smooth, each word carefully measured, her violet eyes fixed on him, studying his face. David forced a smile, but the unease in his chest remained. I guess I am, he admitted. I'm not sure what to expect. You'll see, she replied softly, her tone both reassuring and enigmatic. Thranthoria will answer many of your questions. David glanced at the ship again. He had been through countless diplomatic missions, sat in tense negotiations, faced the pressure of representing Earth's interests in interplanetary relations. But this was different. This was personal. Her proposal still echoed in his mind, a marriage that would bind their worlds together in a way no treaty or alliance ever could. Ready, Ziona asked, her voice a quiet nudge. David nodded, though the tightness in his chest remained. As ready as I'll ever be. With a slight nod, Ziona gestured toward the ship's entrance, which opened with a soft hiss, revealing the glowing interior. David followed her inside, each step feeling heavier than the last, as if the gravity of his decision had suddenly doubled. Once inside, he was immediately struck by the ship's design. It was minimalist yet luxurious, no sharp edges or obvious control panels, just smooth, glowing surfaces that responded to their presence. The air smelled faintly sweet, like fresh rain mingled with a floral undertone, a scent that felt both alien and oddly calming. Ziona led him to a wide observation deck at the center of the ship. The walls were entirely transparent, giving them a panoramic view of the stars as they stretched endlessly into the void. For a moment, David felt like he was floating untethered in space, the stars close enough to touch. It was beautiful, breathtaking even, and it reminded him just how vast the universe was, how small Earth seemed in comparison. You're not used to this, are you? Ziona asked, watching him closely. David shook his head. No, it's overwhelming. Her lips curled into a faint smile. You'll get used to it. He wasn't sure he would. The enormity of space, of this journey, of the decision he would soon have to make, it was all too much. As he stood there, staring out into the stars, he couldn't help but think of the countless lives this one decision could affect. Marrying Ziona wasn't just a personal choice, it was political, cultural, and in many ways symbolic. The weight of it felt suffocating. Why me? He asked suddenly, his voice quiet but firm. Ziona turned to him, her expression softening. Why you? Out of all the ways you could have strengthened ties between our worlds, why this? Why me? Ziona was silent for a moment, as though she was carefully considering her response. Finally, she spoke, her tone measured. You are different, David. I've observed humans for years, politicians, diplomats, leaders. Most see their role as a transaction. They negotiate for power, for leverage. You negotiate for peace. You want more than just victory for Earth. You want coexistence, true harmony. That is rare. David blinked, taken aback by the depth of her words. He had always prided himself on his integrity, but hearing it framed this way, especially by Ziona, left him feeling exposed, vulnerable. She was right, he did want peace, but he had never considered that it might be the very thing that had drawn her to him. I understand the weight of what I've asked you, Ziona continued, her violet eyes soft but unwavering. This proposal isn't just about diplomacy, it's about forging a connection that can withstand the pressures of both our worlds. I believe you're capable of that, and I believe we could be capable of something far greater than any alliance. David felt his breath catch in his throat. There was something in her tone, a sincerity that caught him off guard. For so long he had viewed Ziona as an enigma, a diplomat wrapped in mystery. But in this moment she seemed real. Her vulnerability mirrored his own, and that terrified him more than any political consequence. I don't know if I'm ready for this, he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. Ziona's expression softened even more. I wouldn't expect you to be. But this journey isn't about forcing a decision. It's about giving you the clarity you need to make the right one. The ship's soft hum filled the silence between them as they sailed through the vast emptiness of space. David's gaze returned to the stars, their distant light flickering like promises waiting to be fulfilled. He didn't know if he could do this, if he could marry Ziona, if he could commit himself not just to her but to Thranthoria and all that came with it. But a part of him, deep down, was beginning to wonder if maybe, just maybe, this was exactly what he needed. Hours passed, though time felt irrelevant in the silence of space. The ship continued its smooth journey through the cosmos, the stars outside shifting as they sped toward Thranthoria. David and Ziona spoke little after their initial conversation, each seemingly lost in their own thoughts. David welcomed the quiet, using it to try and process the flood of emotions and questions swirling in his mind. Eventually, Ziona rose from her seat, moving toward the transparent wall that framed the stars outside. We're approaching Thranthoria, she said, her voice calm, but with a note of anticipation. David stood and joined her, his heart rate picking up as he followed her gaze. For a brief moment, all he saw was the dark expanse of space. And then, slowly, a planet came into view. Thranthoria. It was breathtaking. The planet's surface shimmered with hues of blue and violet, its atmosphere swirling with clouds that glowed with an ethereal light. Massive crystalline structures jutted out from the surface, like mountains of glass reflecting the colors of the sky. From the ship's distance, David could see glowing rivers of light cutting through the landscape, winding around cities built from materials that shimmered like gemstones. The entire planet seemed to pulse with energy, as though it were alive. "Welcome to my home," Ziona said softly, her eyes never leaving the view. David couldn't speak. The sight of Thranthoria left him in awe. It was more than he had imagined, more beautiful, more alien, more vibrant. This was the world Ziona came from, the world she was offering him a place in. But as awe-inspiring as it was, it also filled him with a sense of unease. Could he truly belong here? Could he ever truly understand a place this foreign, this advanced, this different? The ship descended smoothly through the planet's atmosphere, the view of the city below becoming sharper and more detailed. David could make out the individual towers of the capital, each one a masterpiece of engineering and art. The streets below glowed with a soft light, and the sky above shifted in a mesmerizing gradient of blues and purples. "We're landing in the capital," Ziona explained. "There, you'll meet with members of our council. They're eager to speak with you." David swallowed his apprehension. This was it, the moment when everything he had been building toward his career, his role as a diplomat, would come to a head. But this time it was more than just diplomacy. It was personal. The ship touched down with a soft thud, and the ramp descended with a smooth, almost silent motion. David took a deep breath, steadying himself before following Ziona down the ramp. The air on Thranthoria was cool, crisp, and carried a faintly floral scent, not unlike the air inside the ship. It was strange but pleasant. As they stepped onto the platform, David felt the eyes of the Thranthorian delegation on him. They stood in neat rows, their silver skin and violet eyes shimmering in the light. Ziona moved with the grace of someone who belonged there, but David felt like an outsider, a human in a world that was far beyond his comprehension. Ziona turned to him, her gaze softening as she sensed his hesitation. "This is just the beginning," she said quietly, her voice reassuring. "There is much for you to see, much for you to learn, but you don't have to make any decisions yet. Let Thranthorya show you what we have to offer." David nodded, though the weight of the decision still pressed down on him. He wasn't ready, he wasn't sure he would ever be. But as he looked at Ziona, at the beauty of the world around him, he knew one thing for certain: he had to at least try. Because the stakes were too high to turn back now. The Thranthorian capital shimmered below, a labyrinth of crystalline towers and glowing streets. David Connors stood by the massive window of his guest quarters, his reflection merging with the surreal landscape outside. Thranthorya was as alien as it was beautiful. Everything here felt dreamlike, its sky a deep violet, its cities gleaming like jewels. It was a world of serenity, yet beneath that calm exterior, David sensed tensions brewing. The anticipation of meeting the Thranthorian Council hung heavy in the air. But more pressing was the decision he was expected to make. Ziona's proposal, both personal and political, was not just a bridge between two civilizations. It was a leap into the unknown. David's pulse quickened as he thought about what this choice meant for both of their worlds. Could he truly bind his future to Thranthorya, and more to the point, to Ziona? He had spent the previous day exploring parts of the city with Ziona as his guide. She had shown him the wonders of her home, ancient Thranthorian structures that pulsed with energy, gardens filled with bioluminescent flora that swayed gently in the breeze. But the awe of discovery couldn't erase the questions swirling in his mind. The proposal she had made wasn't just about politics, and that complicated everything. A knock at the door snapped David from his thoughts. The door slid open to reveal Ziona, her blue skin glowing faintly in the low light of the room. She stood tall, regal as ever, though her expression held something unfamiliar, anxiety, perhaps. "We're expected soon," she said, stepping into the room. David nodded, trying to quell the rising tension inside him. He had been dreading this meeting, the formality of it, the weight of the expectations. Thranthorya's council would want reassurances. They would want to know whether he would stand by Ziona's side, binding Earth and Thranthorya together in a way no diplomatic agreement ever had. He turned to face her. "What should I expect from this council meeting? Are they all in favor of this?" He didn't need to elaborate on what this meant, the proposal of marriage that had sparked a whirlwind of chaos on Earth and sent ripples through Thranthorya. Ziona's eyes flickered with something he couldn't quite place. "The council is divided," she admitted, her voice soft but steady. "Many believe this union could set a powerful precedent for our relations with Earth. Others, however, are less convinced. They fear what it means for our sovereignty." David felt a knot tighten in his chest. "And you? What do you want, Ziona?" Ziona met his gaze, her expression unwavering. "I want what's best for both our worlds. But I also believe our decision can be more than political. I chose you because I saw in you the potential for something greater. Not just as a diplomat, but as a partner." David looked away, his thoughts tangled. The way she spoke made it sound so simple, yet every fiber of his being knew it wasn't. This wasn't just about two people, it was about two planets, two civilizations, two futures. Could they truly build something lasting, or was this just another political maneuver? Before he could respond, another knock came at the door. A Thranthorian aide stood at the threshold, her silver skin gleaming under the ambient lights. "The council is ready for you," she announced, her tone neutral but formal. Ziona gave David a final look, a silent plea that felt more personal than diplomatic. He followed her out of the room, down the long, curved corridor that led to the council chamber. His footsteps echoed in the vast hall, and as they neared the chamber doors, his pulse quickened. He was about to step into a room where not just his future, but the future of two worlds, would be debated. The council chamber was a grand, circular room with high ceilings and walls made of translucent crystal that glowed with a soft, natural light. The air was cool, almost too still. Seated around a massive circular table were the members of the Thranthorian Council, their silver-hued skin gleaming under the ambient glow. Each counselor wore a similar expression, calm, composed, yet with a certain distance, as if they were carefully evaluating everything before them. Ziona took her seat with the grace of someone who had done this countless times. David, however, felt the weight of their gazes settle on him as he sat beside her. His mind raced, trying to anticipate what would come next. The head of the council, an elder named Vorak, rose to speak first. He was taller than the others, his crystalline eyes sharp and clear. He surveyed David with an intensity that made him shift in his seat. "David Connors." Vorak began, his voice deep and deliberate, you stand before us as a representative of Earth, but also as a man who may soon have a much deeper connection to our world. The proposal that Ambassador Ziona has made is unprecedented. No such union between our people and yours has ever been considered. Tell us, why should we trust this union?" David cleared his throat, his mind scrambling to find the right words. "I understand the gravity of what's being proposed. I won't pretend this is a decision I take lightly. But I believe that a partnership between Earth and Thrantoria, one based on mutual respect and understanding, could bring our worlds closer in ways that diplomacy alone cannot." Vorak's eyes narrowed slightly, his expression unreadable. "And what of Earth's sovereignty? Can we trust that your people will not seek to exploit this union for their own gain? Thrantoria's resources and technology are far more advanced than Earth's. What assurances do we have that your people will not take advantage of this marriage?" David hesitated. It was a valid concern, and one that had been raised on Earth as well. There were many who saw this proposal as a way to gain access to Thrantorian technology, a shortcut to power. But David had to tread carefully. He couldn't deny the benefits, but he needed to frame them in a way that reinforced trust. "My goal is not to take from Thrantoria," David said slowly, choosing his words with care. "We seek cooperation, not exploitation. Earth can learn from your people, just as you can learn from us. This marriage, this bond, would symbolize a union of equals, not one of dominance." The tension in the room was palpable. David could feel the weight of their scrutiny, the way each word he spoke was being analyzed for hidden meaning. He glanced at Ziona, who remained composed beside him, though her eyes flickered with something like quiet encouragement. Another counselor, a woman with sharp features and cold eyes, spoke next. "Ziona's judgment is highly respected here," she said, her tone measured. "But even she cannot guarantee that this union will not bring unintended consequences. You are asking us to trust you, David Connors. But why should we? Why you, of all humans?" David's pulse quickened. He had been waiting for this question, dreading it. Why him? Ziona had given him her reasons, but the truth was, he still didn't fully understand it himself. What made him so special? Why had Ziona chosen him for something so monumental? He took a breath, steadying himself. "I can't offer you a perfect answer. I can't guarantee that everything will go smoothly, or that this union will be without challenges. But I can tell you that my commitment to peace is genuine. I've spent my life trying to bridge divides, and to find common ground where others see conflict. Ziona saw something in me that aligned with her vision. I'm here because I believe in the possibility of something greater than the sum of our parts." The council fell into a hushed silence, the air thick with tension. Vorak exchanged a glance with the other counselors, their silent communication unreadable to David. He could feel the weight of their decision looming over him, as though the very atmosphere of the room held its breath. Finally, Vorak spoke again, his voice calm but firm. "We will deliberate further. This is not a decision we can make lightly." Ziona stood, signaling that the meeting had concluded, and David followed her out of the chamber. His chest felt tight, the enormity of what had just happened weighing down on him. He had tried to convince them, to show them that this was more than just politics, more than just an alliance. But had he done enough? As they walked down the corridor, Ziona glanced at him, her expression softer now, though still composed. "You spoke well, David." David shook his head. "I'm not sure it was enough. They don't trust me. They don't trust Earth." "They are cautious," yes, Ziona agreed, her voice calm. "But they are also wise. They understand the potential of what we're offering, even if they hesitate to embrace it fully." David sighed, running a hand through his hair. What if they say no? What happens then? Ziona stopped and turned to him, her violet eyes locking onto his. "Then we find another way. This is not just about the council's approval, David. It's about us. It's about whether you believe in what we can build together." David's breath caught. Us. The word felt heavy, laden with meaning beyond diplomacy. Ziona wasn't just talking about the political future of their world, she was talking about the two of them, about the partnership she had proposed. And in that moment, David realized just how much was at stake. This wasn't just a decision about politics or diplomacy. It was about trust, about connection, about the possibility of something far deeper. "I need time," he admitted, his voice quiet but firm. Ziona nodded, her expression unreadable. "Time is something we have, at least for now." They continued walking in silence, but the tension between them was undeniable. The weight of the future pressed down on both of them, and as they made their way through the glowing corridors of the Thranthorian capital, David couldn't shake the feeling that everything was about to change. For better or for worse. The Thranthorian capital shimmered in the fading twilight, its crystal towers reaching into the sky like gleaming monuments to a world David Connors was only beginning to understand. He stood at the window of his guest quarters, staring at the city below as if trying to decipher the alien world before him. The city was a masterpiece alive with soft hues of blue and violet that pulsed gently, as though the entire metropolis was breathing. For all its beauty, Thranthorius still felt foreign to him, and the decision he faced even more so. Ziona's proposal, which had sparked a whirlwind of political debate and personal doubt, hung over him like an unshakable weight. The question wasn't just whether he would marry Ziona and form a bond between their worlds, it was whether he could see a future here, among a people so different, in a life he hadn't chosen. His comm device buzzed, breaking his reverie. The screen flickered to life, revealing Lily's familiar face. His sister's expression was concerned, her eyes searching his, as though she could sense the turmoil from light years away. "David," she began, her voice gentle but firm, "how are you holding up?" David sighed, leaning against the window. "I don't know, Lil. I'm not sure how to even begin answering that. I'm meeting with the council again soon. They're expecting my decision." Lily frowned, her brow furrowing in worry. "And what's your decision? Have you really thought about what this means, not just for Earth or Thranthoria, but for you?" David didn't respond immediately. He had spent so much time thinking about the political implications, the potential fallout, and the weight of the responsibility. But Lily's question cut deeper. It forced him to consider himself, to ask what he wanted. "I wish I could say I had all the answers," David admitted. "But it's not that simple. This isn't just about me." Lily's eyes softened. "I get that, but you can't forget about yourself in all this. Ziona didn't propose to Earth, she proposed to you. Doesn't that mean something?" David ran a hand through his hair, the weight of her words settling in. Ziona had made her choice clear. She believed in him, trusted him with something far more profound than political strategy. But did he trust himself to carry that responsibility? Could he trust her? "Lily, it's not just a diplomatic move," he said quietly, almost to himself. "It's real, it's personal, and I'm not sure if I'm ready." Lily's expression softened, and she leaned in closer to the camera. "Whatever decision you make, it has to be for the right reasons, David. It has to be for you." David nodded slowly, though the uncertainty still clung to him like a shadow. "I'll figure it out." "I know you will," she said with a small smile. "Just remember you're not alone in this." The call ended, and the silence of the room seemed to amplify the magnitude of what lay ahead. He had always been able to think his way through problems, to rationalize and negotiate. But this decision went beyond reason. It demanded something deeper, something he wasn't sure he could articulate. Hours later, David found himself walking down the gleaming corridors of the Thranthorian palace, Ziona at his side. The Grand Council awaited them, and with it, the culmination of everything he had been grappling with since her proposal. The air was thick with tension, though Ziona's composure remained intact, her steps graceful and measured. But as they neared the council chamber, David couldn't shake the feeling that she, too, was carrying the weight of uncertainty beneath her poised exterior. "Are you sure about this?" Ziona asked quietly, her voice so soft it barely reached him. David glanced at her, his heart tightening at the vulnerability in her question. She had always appeared so calm, so certain, but here was a glimpse of the woman behind the diplomat, a woman who, like him, was uncertain of what the future held. "I'm not sure of anything," David admitted, "but I know I have to make a choice." Ziona gave a small nod, her expression unreadable, but there was something in her eyes, something raw and unguarded that made him pause. She wasn't just a figurehead, she was someone who had risked much, perhaps more than he had realized. The doors to the council chamber opened, revealing the grand circular room where the Thranthorian council awaited. The translucent crystal walls glowed with a soft, ethereal light, casting long shadows across the room. Seated around the massive table were the councillors, their silver-hued skin shimmering under the ambient glow. At the head of the table stood Vorak, his crystalline eyes watching David closely, as if he could see through the layers of uncertainty to the core of what lay beneath. "David Connors," Vorak began, his voice even but with a weight that made the air seem heavier, "we have heard your arguments. We have debated amongst ourselves. Now, we look to you for a decision. Will you accept Ambassador Ziona's proposal and unite our worlds through marriage?" The silence that followed was almost suffocating. David could feel every eye in the room fixed on him, but more than that, he could feel Ziona beside him, silent, patient, waiting. This moment wasn't just about the fate of two worlds, it was about trust. Trust in Ziona, trust in their future together, and trust in himself. David took a breath, steadying himself. The weight of the decision pressed down on him, but as he stood there, surrounded by an alien world that had already begun to feel strangely familiar, something shifted inside him. He had been afraid of this choice because it felt too large, too uncertain. But now he realized that uncertainty was part of the journey. There were no guarantees in diplomacy, in life, or in love. "I've given this a lot of thought," David began, his voice firm but measured. "And I know this decision will shape the future of both our worlds. But more than that, it will shape our lives. Ziona, you asked me to trust you, and I do. I trust that together we can build something stronger than what exists today." He turned to Ziona, meeting her gaze. "I accept your proposal." The room remained silent for a long, breathless moment. Then, slowly, Varak inclined his head in acknowledgement, his expression unreadable but not unfriendly. The counselors exchanged glances, some nodding in agreement, others still cautious, but none voiced opposition. David felt a weight lift from his chest, though the tension in the air lingered. Ziona's eyes softened, a small, almost imperceptible smile playing on her lips. "Thank you," she whispered, her voice barely audible but filled with emotion. The rest of the council meeting passed in a blur, filled with discussions about the logistics of the union and the steps to be taken in both worlds. But David's mind was elsewhere, his thoughts consumed by the realization of what he had just committed to. He had made a decision not just for the future of Earth and Thranthoria, but for himself, and for Ziona. Later that evening, David stood on the balcony of the palace, overlooking the city bathed in starlight. The air was cool, crisp, and carried the faint scent of something floral and unfamiliar. The stars above were brighter than they ever seemed on Earth, casting a soft glow over the alien landscape. Ziona appeared beside him, her presence as quiet and calm as ever, though there was something different about her now, something more open, more vulnerable. "I wasn't sure what you would decide," she said after a long pause. David glanced at her, a small smile tugging at his lips. Neither was I. Ziona turned to face him, her violet eyes searching his face. "I know this wasn't easy for you. I didn't expect it to be. But I need you to know, I didn't choose you for political reasons alone. I chose you because I believe in what we can build together." David's heart tightened at her words. She had said something similar before, but now it felt different, deeper, more personal. He could see the weight of her own uncertainty, her own hope, reflected in her eyes. "I believe in that too," David said softly. "But this is new for both of us. There's no guidebook for what we're about to do." Ziona smiled, a genuine, unguarded smile that made David's breath catch. "No, there isn't. But maybe that's what makes it worth doing." They stood in silence for a moment, watching the city below, its lights twinkling like stars. The weight of the future still pressed on them, but it no longer felt suffocating. It felt possible. "We'll figure it out," David said, more to himself than to her. "Together." Ziona nodded, her eyes never leaving his. Together. The announcement of their union sent shockwaves through both worlds. On Earth, the media was in a frenzy, with news outlets dissecting every detail of the proposal, the marriage, and its implications. On Thranthoria, the response was more measured, but there was a sense of cautious optimism in the air. The political ramifications were still being debated in council chambers and government offices, but for David and Ziona, the real work was just beginning. Their lives had become a symbol of unity, of what was possible between two vastly different worlds. But as they moved forward, they knew it would not be without challenges. Yet, for the first time in a long time, David felt something he hadn't expected: hope. Hope that this union, this partnership, could be more than just a political tool, that it could be real, and that together they could build something lasting, something that mattered. The future stretched out before them, uncertain and full of possibility. But as David stood beside Ziona, he knew one thing for certain. They were ready for it. Together.